got a lot to cover today on the show. Dave Cohen's going to join us at 8:30 to talk about the Georgia State Panthers. Gabriela Cruz of Fox Sports Cleveland will come on at 8:10. And then we'll have Rico Phillips on at 8:50. He is the 2019 Willie O'Ree Award winner. And also we've got stuff from UGA football this week. And it'll be right here on ATL Prime Sports. JJ, how you doing? I know you've got some great headlines for this evening.
Doing well, man. Got some really cool ones tonight. To me, there's something good that's coming out of the Kobe Bryant and Gigi Bryant tragedy. Scott Boras, baseball super agent, said to the Los Angeles Times that he will create an internship for the teenage daughter of John Altrabelli, who was the Orange Coast College baseball coach, who, along with Kobe and Gigi, were among the 9 people killed in last month's helicopter crash in California. So pretty cool there. I really like what Scott Boras is doing. He's the head of a lot of major deals around Major League Baseball right now. He's paying tribute to the college baseball coach that was on there. Pretty cool deal. TC, what do you think, real quick?
I think that's fantastic. That's about the only good thing that's came out of it, other than people coming together as one. You saw Bill Russell, the great Boston Celtic, wearing a Kobe Bryant jersey at Kobe's Memorial at the Staples Center. I thought that was terrific.
Yep. Next headline for us. I guess Joe Burrow's got to consider retirement. And his response to the small hands was priceless. As you all know, you may have heard, I'm joking about the retirement, by the way. But as you guys may have heard, he was criticized for his small hands, only had 9-inch hands. And his response on Twitter was absolutely priceless. He goes, "I'm considering retirement after I was informed the football will be slipping out of my tiny hands. Please keep me in your thoughts." Check it out on our Twitter page. I retweeted it for you on the show at JJGetYouOne. Guys, that was pretty hilarious. A great response, good humor. Kind of shows a lot of character, if you ask me. TC, real quick.
Shows a lot of character. I wonder how big his feet are. So we'll find out. I mean, hey, that's the next step, right? The hands, the feet, and whatever. So, hey, there you have it.
Absolutely. And then we got to talk about the biggest headline locally. It's got to be Braves first baseman Freddie Freeman, TC. Going to miss the rest of this week's spring training matchups with elbow irritation. Big deal or not? If it lingers, it could be. But the big guys up in the front office, they expect them back next week, and they're not concerned, according to Alex Anthopoulos in an MLB.com article by Mark Bowman. So I would tend to say, hey, if Double-A thinks he's going to be okay and he'll be back next week. He said he was trying to buy into the game to try and play tomorrow, but we'll see. I don't think he's going to play until next week. They're going to shut him down. But he said he was able to play if he wanted to. So we'll see if this is a lingering thing. I hope it isn't, because that could be a big deal if it is.
It could be, JJ, and it could be a huge deal. We can play devil's advocate here. Freddie Freeman had this same right elbow irritation down the stretch, and he struggled very much so last season. And also he struggled in the first round of the playoffs, which was one of the many reasons why the Braves ended up losing to the Cardinals. So what happens if Freddie Freeman's out a considerable amount of time? That is the best, most consistent hitter they have in the lineup. You really can't replace somebody who's that good.
You absolutely can't. And we'll harp on this for a couple minutes before we get our first guest on this evening. But it's going to have to me, there's going to be an impact. You mentioned the surgery. He removed bone spurs and a bunch of other just a jambalaya of stuff that was going on with his elbow there. If this thing is irritated on a weekly basis, you're going to miss games. I don't care who you are. You can't make contact with the ball. That's his front elbow as a left-handed hitter. So you're looking at it. That elbow's exposed. They're going to put braces on it, but still, the more irritation, the less movement, the less flexibility at first base. So this is going to be a huge deal if it lingers. But that's the big question here: if it lingers, as James Franco would say in Pineapple Express, linger.
Well, hey, you talked about the doctors.
Problem.
You talked about the doctors. Dr. Alcheck. They didn't seem to seem concerned at all when Alex Anthopoulos spoke about it today. They want him to rest right now. But to me, you can rest all you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you start using it again, we got to play devil's advocate once again. It's going to be a problem here and there, and they're going to have to manage this situation throughout a long 162-game season. This team has a lot of aspirations and has the second biggest odds in the National League to get to the World Series, just behind the Dodgers, if you believe in that stuff. And I don't really believe in it. I just read it and go on from there. But to me, if he's out, that puts a big hole in the lineup. And to me, it affects the hitters around him. It's definitely going to affect Acuna. I mean, he's either going to hit. We want him to lead off, but if Freeman's out, he's definitely hitting third, and they're going to hit him in cleanup this year, JJ.
Yeah, that's a big. You touched on that point perfectly. I was going to say very similar thoughts. If Freeman's not in the 3-hole, your next best hitter to fill that spot would be Acuna. But we know Acuna's best set is right on that leadoff spot. Why? Because he gets on, he gets over. Albies drives him in with the sacrifice, moves him over at least. Or like I said, drives him in the front run, and then Freeman, boom, takes care of the rest. That was a lot of how Braves got off to a successful start last year. So you're right. This irritation, is it going to last? What's going to happen? It's going to be a big question mark on the season. If he starts to miss games like this down early on, even down the stretch, that's going to be a big question mark. It's going to be, you mentioned the management of it. What is Snicker going to do with the management of this situation? How's it going to be in April, May, June, July, moving down to the stretch of the pennant race? How's that elbow going to hold up?
We're going to find out, JJ. Let's talk about Cole Hamels real quick. Cole Hamels has some shoulder discomfort during an off-season workout. He won't resume throwing for a throwing program for at least 2 or more weeks, according to Mark Bowman of MLB.com. This is an injury you can't rush. I mean, we all know about Hamels last season, 7-7, 3.81 ERA, 141 innings. He's 36. He's got over 2,500 innings under his belt. Last season he missed games because of shoulder fatigue, an oblique injury. And, he's not going to be there for opening day, which to me is not that important. It's about keeping him healthy for the rest of the season.
It's got to be. It's got to be about load management. And again, it's going to be the same.
And I hate that word.
I do too. But with Cole Hamels and an $18 million contract, you got to get the most out of this guy at the end of the season. You fully expect the Atlanta Braves to be in the pennant race, and especially in the division race till the end. If he has to be serviceable, if he has to go down to Northport and in late and early into the season and have the rehab facility that they have down there, which is huge that they didn't have in Orlando, they can have a rehab facility, give a guy a full spring training workout before he comes back to the scene. They did not have that luxury in Orlando. So with this, they may do that. You may see Cole Hamels come into the season later on, way late. I mean, I would take precaution with this thing, make sure he's good to go, because you got to have him for the stretch. You mentioned the stats. He got a lot of innings, but he had a pretty decent year last year. He was 500, 381 ERA last year, 139 WHIP. The guy can still strike people out. Had 143 of them last year. So you still expect this guy to be an impactful player. In order to do so, that load management that we both dislike is going to have to be put in play.
And let's be clear from the beginning, JJ. We don't expect him to be the number one starter.
No.
We expect Mike Soroka to be the number one starter, and he has a groin injury. He's going to start this Friday against the Yankees in Grapefruit League play. He was 13-4 last year with a 2.68 ERA, and this kid's only going to get better. But we don't expect Cole Hamels to be the one. We would like to see Cole Hamels be the 3 guy. And honestly, if he was the 4th guy, it would be a dream, because that means, the rest of the young kids are really coming on, and this team would be really good. But Soroka's the one that's going to be the man if this team is really going to go somewhere deep this year.
Gotta be the ace. Snicker cannot be scared to pitch him in a meaningful game down the season either. I think that's going to be the key to Soroka's success this year. He was close to the Cy Young last year. Can he turn the corner? He is an ace. He is young. He's got the pitches. He's got the tools. He's got the lineup. This is a great pitching staff if we can get Cole Hamels and everybody else together on board.
Well, speaking of everybody else, Max Fried, he faltered down the stretch last year. You don't have Julio Teheran. You do have Fultonevich, which I think is key. And you also have, Sean Newcomb, who'll be in the rotation. So anyhow, that's the end of this segment. We're going to go ahead and go to our first guest here on ATL Prime Sports. We're going to go ahead and introduce Gabrielle Cruz. We welcome her from Fox Sports Cleveland. She is the founder of Love Doesn't Shove. Gabrielle, welcome to ATL Prime Sports this evening with TC and JJ.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
It's going very well. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming on. Looking at your career, and we'll go to the baseball part of it and the broadcasting part of it later on. I really want to talk about Love Doesn't Shove right off.
Okay.
I want you to talk about it in detail. Tell us how you got the idea to start this, because when reading on it, I think it's tremendous, and I think you're way ahead of your time. And also, tell us what it's all about. I would really like to hear that for our listeners.
Okay. Well, Love Doesn't Shove is my nonprofit organization, and I started it in 2014, turned nonprofit 2016, and ever since I've been doing educational presentations in schools about dating violence education. So just kind of starting an interactive conversation with students, helping them identify, the behaviors that are healthy and respectful in a relationship versus the ones that are not. So the mission of the organization really stemmed from my own experiences of violence. But now at this point, it's really all about the education and hopefully preventing young kids who maybe don't come from the healthiest environments and maybe don't know what is healthy. It's about preventing from anybody else potentially being in a bad situation, or just knowing how to get help, or knowing what to do if it's a friend.
I think this is brilliant. When did it start? When did you start this organization?
So I started with a little fundraiser at school in 2014. I went to John Carroll University in the Cleveland area, and this was before there were any real national conversations or hashtags or movements or anything really talking about dating violence or domestic violence. I remember that actually in the year of 2014, I'm pretty sure, there was this Ray Rice situation that actually did spark a national conversation. Former running back for the Ravens who knocked out his fiance on an elevator, and then TMZ got the footage, and it just sparked this huge national conversation. And I was really relieved that conversation was being had, because that's kind of what I was grassroots, small conversation trying to start at my school at that time, making it a campus conversation and just handing out educational facts or little quizzes and having one-on-one conversations with people. And that's how it started. And I've been pleased to see how the national conversation, or just pretty much people are leaning in the direction of violence isn't cool. Violence against your loved ones is definitely not cool. So that's good. It's positive.
You're absolutely right. JJ here, Gabriella Cruz, founder of Love Doesn't Shove and Fox Sports Cleveland. Welcome. It's good to have you on. I love it. Let's talk about your music a little bit. I was listening to some of it. I like it. How can our listeners hear your music, and how did you get into music?
Oh yeah, you'll have to check me out. I don't know. I guess I'm a kind of a late bloomer. I was an athlete in college, and I was an athlete in high school. So year round, I was always playing a sport. So I didn't really have time to do many other things. But ironically, after college, I just got into singing, and I had already been writing a lot of my own stuff. But I don't know. I embarked on this creative endeavor to go produce the music that I was singing and writing, and then I did, and I've got a few songs. I have a lot of songs written, but only 3 produced so far, and almost a 4th. But yeah, it's just fun. It's a fun creative outlet for me. I do goofy stuff with singing too. I do little parodies that I've posted before, and things like that. But yeah, it's just a good outlet. You should check me out on iTunes. I'm on Apple Music, all the streaming services, basically.
That's awesome, Gabriella. That really is. You know, you're a person after my heart. In 2013 at John Carroll University, you were the first cross country to get All-American honors there. That's a tremendous achievement. I ran cross country in high school and could have ran collegiately, but I suffered some injuries that didn't allow me to do it. And that just shows you're an excellent athlete. Tell us a little bit about that too, your cross country career at John Carroll University. And also, before you do that, there's a famous NFL football head coach that played football at John Carroll University and won a lot of games. Do you know who that is?
Are you talking about, did you just say Coach Don Shula?
Yeah, that's it. There's your answer. You got it. Don Shula. I couldn't stump you. That's correct. Don Shula played at John Carroll University, and you got it. So, wow. So tell us a little bit about your cross country. I'm sorry?
I was going to say there's kind of a lot of Carroll grads doing things in the NFL right now. I know there's a handful with the Patriots, coaching-wise or staff-wise. It's kind of cool. It's been like a pipeline to the NFL with these football brains that have come out of John Carroll.
Wasn't Paul Brown out of John Carroll before he went to the Cleveland Browns?
Paul Brown? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Before he went to the Cleveland Browns, I thought so. I'd have to look that up, but I remember reading Don Shula's book a long time ago. I'm in my mid-50s. It's called The Winning Edge. And I'm just trying to recall the chapters in that book. And some of them were, he talked about his time at John Carroll. And I believe he did play for Coach Brown. But just go ahead and tell me a little bit about your cross country, how you earned All-American honors there.
It's funny. The cross country thing, I think, came more as a result of an iron infusion. I spent most of my collegiate career anemic and didn't know, and so my times were really funny because in track I was a mid-distance athlete, and a lot of my sprint times were fast, and no one could understand why. Then, if you can run a quarter, for example, in 58 seconds, how come you can't run 2:10 or below in the half mile or sub 5 in the mile? I was having a hard time with the longer distances, ironically, even though I did run cross country. So there was a big mismatch there. I was better at the shorter distances than the long distance. And so then I think it was senior year. Yeah, senior year is when I really figured out how anemic I was. And I had a doctor give me an iron infusion. And I cannot make this up, like 3 weeks later, I qualified for the national meet for the first time and then became an All-American, placed in the top 30. I was 26th in the nation.
So the iron.
And I felt, yeah, I felt amazing. I thought they gave me drugs. I was like, am I allowed to get, it was crazy, but it made my track season a lot easier as well. I was finally starting to break a little bit of barriers, and then when I went to grad school, I walked on to the Syracuse track team and Coach Bell made their national championship program, and they took me and made me so much better than I was. And I finally did break the 5-minute mile mark, and I loved their program too. I learned a lot about running at Syracuse.
That's impressive. Under 5-minute mile. That's something I definitely could not do. You're listening to Gabriella Cruz of Fox Sports Cleveland and the founder of Love Doesn't Shove. Let's talk a little baseball here. Nolan Jones moved up from the minors rather fast. He was invited to spring training Monday. The Indians' top infield prospect, listeners. Will we see Nolan Jones in the show this year?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know exactly what the blueprint of Tito's mind is, but they tend to put a lot of faith in their young people. And I think if he shows some cool stuff in spring training, I mean, they'll have a good feel. I think it's good to have all these competitive, young guys sort of keeping each other going on the field. At least from a pitching standpoint, we've seen that. Like some of these young pitchers we've had come up and step up have really set this cool chemistry in motion for all the pitchers. I think Jones could do that in the infield the same way and use his athleticism to spark us there.
You're listening to Gabriella Cruz here on ATL Prime Sports. Gabrielle, let's talk about Carlos Carrasco. He has a mild strain on his right hip flexor. I guess he done it while he was doing squats. We all know he had an inspiration comeback last season. He came back in September from leukemia as a relief pitcher. And now, other than the hip flexor, he's in excellent health. Tell us a little bit about Carlos and what the Indians expect from him this season.
Oh, Carlos is awesome. He's a good pitcher, but he's also a good person. He's a great energy to have on the team. I think he's valuable in so many ways. If he really can get back to sort of his old self and being consistent and being able to hit the mark, just be a little more accurate on things, because he does have the tools. He's not weak. I know cancer, they say, can make you so weak, and maybe that was part of the reason he obviously started to falter a little bit last year, we saw. But he does have the talent and the ability, and I hope he just stays healthy and, we see a really solid Cookie Carrasco.
Gabriella, how did the Indians fare in the AL Central this season?
Well, we didn't have a postseason this year, but let's see, we beat up pretty good on the Tigers, I know.
Thank you. I'm a Tigers fan. I appreciate that.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Rub it in.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't remember exactly what the final standings were off the top of my head, but
they finished second behind Minnesota. So JJ's question.
Oh yeah, duh.
Yeah, it's okay. JJ's
That's
basically
right.
right. His question was, where do you expect the Indians to finish this year? Because you've got not only Minnesota in the division, but you got resurgent Chicago White Sox are supposed to make some noise this year too.
Oh yeah, and that's tough. If the White Sox really are starting to cook up nicely, that's tough too. Because Minnesota, that's right. They were the ones we were really trying to fight with at the end. We were back and forth. That race. It was exciting. It was sad to see us fall short. Because for a minute there, we had made this huge comeback, really, and we had a real chance at making up for some of the ground we lost earlier in the season and trying to go to the postseason. But, maybe I think it just fuels this team, and it'll be interesting to see the different parts that come together and who steps up. I mentioned the pitching earlier, but that's a really interesting group, and Shane Bieber just broke out for us and I think he's going to be even more of a staple guy for us, especially with Kluber not with us anymore, and he was just sort of that veteran presence. But ironically, Shane has that maturity beyond his years and that poise, and he's only going to get better. And that's going to spark everybody else to get better. And it's not like we don't have any athletes in the outfield. We have a surplus of outfielders. So if we can just hit the ball, if Jose can stay. Jose kind of went through a real down, a little slump with the bat this past season. But then after he came back from being injured, he got hot again. And then we were like, okay, there he is. So if we can just be consistent at the plate and stay healthy, that's going to be huge.
Last question, Gabriel. Actually, last two. We have about 2 minutes. Answer them, I guess, as quickly as you can. I'm looking at Francisco Lindor. He's about to be a free agent in about 20 months. What do the Indians do? Do they play it out? And then also, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about Terry Francona, who led this franchise to the World Series in 2016. What is it like being around him?
Oh, Francona's awesome. I saw a funny tweet recently that said, if you compare sort of the head coaches of our major sports teams in Cleveland, basically it's that with the Cavs and Browns, we're rotating out coaches all the time, and with not a lot to show for it, except for 2016, we did win an NBA championship, but we also had LeBron, so he's kind of his own coach. But the cool thing about Francona is it doesn't matter what group of guys Tito gets. He's such a good leader. We've been a winning team. He came on in 2013, so he has stayed with us. He's persisted with us, and we've been a winning team for a handful of seasons with him. He's really taken us to he's just elevated us, and he's found ways to use what we have, the people that we have, the athletes that we have, and capitalize on their strengths and make everybody feel included. He's just so good at being a leader, and it's cool to watch. And he's a nice guy. He's literally nice to everyone. So he's always cool with me. And he went out of his way at Tribe Fest this year to say he saw a recent article about Love Doesn't Shove, and he had no idea. And he was just basically like, hey, I think that's really badass. So it's cool that he's just supportive of people, and it shows with the team too. He doesn't baby anybody, but he certainly doesn't put anybody down in a negative way. That's not the type of motivator he is. I forget.
Yeah, Francisco Lindor. Do you think the Indians will play it out, or what do you think they'll do in the next 20 months, real quick?
It's so wild. I feel like I can't even guess anymore, because I kind of thought for a minute he was going to be gone, and now we're waiting. So he's definitely going to start the season with us. I don't know. I wish we could just full on keep him, but
It's all about the money, isn't it?
Yeah, they made
It's
all
all
these
about
cuts.
the money.
Yeah, I just don't know if we can offer him the type of money, but who knows? They can get so creative, this front office, and Frankie really loves it in Cleveland. So if he really means that, who knows? Maybe they come up with some creative thing. I know Cleveland wants him for as long as they can have him.
Well, I'll tell you what, if he goes to the Tigers, I won't complain. Anyhow, Gabriella, thank you so much for coming on to our show. Please follow myself and JJ on Twitter, and follow us on ATL Prime Sports, and tell everybody how they can go to Love Doesn't Shove on Twitter and follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm at the Sports Gab on Twitter, and Love Doesn't Shove on all the social media. But if you're interested more in services or the education part of what the organization does, it's lovedoesn'tshove.org. But thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming on. You're fantastic. Yes, you're welcome on this program anytime. And now we consider you a friend of the show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. That was Gabriella Cruz, the founder of Love Doesn't Shove, and also of Fox Sports Cleveland. JJ, we got about a minute or so, and Dave Cohen will be coming on, the voice of Georgia State football, basketball, and baseball. Let's just talk real quick about this interview. Do you believe she was ahead of her time? She when reading about it today, she talked about how she had a circumstance, but she didn't go in detail. But that's what gave her the idea to do this.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan. Once you booked the interview, you mentioned who she was. I started doing my research, and you know me, I'm a big advocate of women, and I'm very against domestic abuse and violence, and domestic and just violence in general. So I was a big fan. Another cool thing about Gabriella, I noticed, and I didn't get a chance to ask her about this. We ran out of time, but it was so cool to know that she came into the Indians organization right when they went to the World Series against the Chicago Cubs. That must have been an incredible feeling. Wow, what a great interview, Gabriella. Thanks for coming on. What a great interview.
Yes, definitely a fantastic interview, and you can tell her role with the Indians obviously is a huge one. And obviously she covers the Indians. She's on during the broadcast. I mean, she's really entrenched herself in the Cleveland community even before she became a broadcaster. And now that she is a broadcaster, she's really entrenched herself. I mean, this is home for her. She went to John Carroll University. That's where Don Shula, we mentioned during the interview, where that's where she played. That's where she played. She played at John Carroll. She ran cross country there. Amazing. Just amazing. So anyhow, our calling number is 678-280-7123. JJ and I will be glad to take your call after the third interview. We're waiting for Dave Cohen, the voice of Georgia State University basketball, football, and baseball, to come on ATL Prime Sports. And then at 8:50 p.m., we'll have Rico Phillips, who is the winner of the 2019 Willie O'Ree Award. That's a tremendous community award in the National Hockey League. We'll let him tell a little bit about his tour here, the last year that he's been going on. So before Dave comes on, JJ, I guess we'll go ahead and talk some Georgia State basketball. It's been a rough sledding for Georgia State. The last two ball games are coming off losses to UT Arlington and Texas State, teams that they defeated earlier in the season. They're now 11-7, and they're 2.5 games behind Arkansas Little Rock in the Sun Belt Conference, 18-11 overall. And this is a club that, JJ, they're not getting to the free throw line like their opponents. And they're just not getting to the line like their opponents, and they're getting beat on the boards. And that's a bad recipe for losing games, isn't it?
It is. It's not good. I know. I think Dave just joined the line right now. Dave,
yes, he did. Yes, Dave, he did. I'll go ahead and bring him on. Dave, welcome to ATL Prime Sports, the voice of Georgia State football, basketball, and baseball. And Dave, we were just talking about Georgia State basketball before you called in. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate you having me back. Sorry I couldn't be with you last week. We were out in Texas on a 2-game Sun Belt Conference road trip that didn't go as expected. So now a little bit of backs against the wall with 2 big games this week, starting Friday night with Georgia Southern in Atlanta, and then the final regular season game on March 3 with first place Arkansas Little Rock paying a visit to Atlanta for the one and only matchup between Georgia State and UALR. So what a way to finish the season, and we'll see what happens. We're headed into March Madness and the Sun Belt Conference tournament first. And we finish it up with 2 pretty good teams, our in-state rival and the top team in the league right now.
Well, the clubs, the one, Georgia State, they put themselves in this hole now. I just mentioned earlier, they're 11-7, 2.5 games behind Arkansas Little Rock in the Sun Belt Conference. They're coming off losses to UT Arlington and Texas State. They lost to UT Arlington 70-62 and Texas State 86-76. I guess I'm gonna play bad news. I'll let you play good news. The bad news is that the club was beat on the boards, by Texas State. and also at the free throw line disparity, Texas State was 24 for 30 on the line. Georgia State was 9 of 15. And then also in the game against UTA, Georgia State was 8 of 17, and UTA was 16 of 22. Plus, they only scored 27 second half points, which was the season low. So, I mean, I'll let you go ahead and do the good news. I did the bad news. What's the good news coming out of these two games besides they, unfortunately lost?
Well, I don't know that there's necessarily good news in quotations. Texas State is a team that not a lot of folks have been talking about. And by the way, keep an eye on South Alabama. That was the team, if you read a lot of the preseason magazines, and I know we've talked about this, that was picked by many of the, preseason prognosticators and polls to win the Sun Belt regular season. They have moved into a tie for third place with both Georgia State and Georgia Southern. Texas State, that's why that game on Saturday evening out there in San Marcos was such a big game, because it was basically whoever won took over sole possession of second place. But Texas State, having seen them twice now, we beat them in Atlanta, lost to them obviously last Saturday. Texas State has always been this year a team that not a lot of people have been talking about. But, they've got Nigel Pearson, who at almost 20 points a game is leading the Sun Belt Conference in scoring. They're a pretty good rebounding team with Eric Terry, and then number 25, Sule, I forget his first name, that both of their post players really hurt us last week, not just scoring, but as you mentioned, in a rebounding capacity. So Texas State is right now in sole possession of second place, right behind Arkansas Little Rock. And, the reason why finishing first or second is such a big deal, this is kind of an off-the-road kind of season for the Sun Belt Conference with regards to the postseason tournament. Since we've been back in the league, every year all 12 teams have advanced to New Orleans and Lakefront Arena for the annual Sun Belt Conference tournament. Well, the way they're doing it this year, and I don't know what it will look like beyond this year, but if you finish first or second, you get a triple bye to New Orleans. And this year it's going to be at the Smoothie King Center in downtown New Orleans, where the New Orleans Pelicans play. So that's why finishing first or second is such a big deal, because then you'd be in a position where you only have to win 2 games to reach the NCAA tournament. So you got to figure Little Rock is already going to be there, and that's why that game on Saturday was so big. So the bottom 2 teams in the league won't make the Sun Belt Conference tournament. Louisiana Monroe, let's say I don't have the standings in front of me, but Louisiana Monroe and Troy. The other 8 teams, the tournament will start out at home sites. So the top 4 seeds will host the bottom 4 seeds, and they will whittle it down until out of those 8, they come away with 2 more teams that will become teams 3 and 4 to go out to the Smoothie King Center in New Orleans. So by not holding on to second place as we didn't on Saturday, and depending upon what happens on Friday night against Georgia Southern, and then on the 3rd of March against Arkansas Little Rock, fortunately both games at the Georgia State Sports Arena in Atlanta, where Georgia State has been pretty good, we're going to have to, if we find ourselves in that position, meaning Georgia State, fight our way through those other 7 teams as part of the middle of the pack there, playing for the right to get one of those final 2 spots to go to New Orleans. That's kind of the bad. If the bad dash the good, we're also possibly going to need some help along the way to hopefully make that come to fruition. But we'll see. But we had a 3-game winning streak heading out to Texas. Texas Arlington played. It's kind of crazy this time of the year. So Georgia Southern and Georgia State are travel partners. While we're in Arlington losing, they're at Texas State losing, and they were down by 20 a good bit of that game as I'm updating the Sun Belt scoreboard on our radio broadcast. And so they end up losing by 15, and, of course, we lose at UT Arlington. Then we head to San Marcos, and they head up to Arlington. Obviously, we ended up getting beat, as you mentioned. You just gave that score. Georgia Southern goes into the College Park Center in Arlington, Texas, and beats UT Arlington by 20. I think it was 91-71. Kind of an eye-opener to get beat one night at Texas State, come back, then beat a UT Arlington team that played lights out for the most part against us, as we started that road trip. So this time of the year, in a league that has a lot of parity, more so than we've seen in years past, you just never know what to expect night in and night out. And that's why this Georgia Southern game on Friday night and the final game against Arkansas Little Rock put a big question mark over both of them, and we'll see what happens.
Well, the good news, Dave, is that this week, I know they lost both ball games, but the good news is the play of Kane Williams. He had a career high of 23 in 7 and 6 versus Texas State. He turned around and had 21 in the other ball game with 7 boards, and Corey Allen chipped in with 17 and 12 apiece. Talk about the play of Kane Williams.
Yeah, it's interesting, Kane's situation, and for those fans or folks that are listening, just a heads up that we do a Panther Insider podcast almost weekly. It's called the Panther Insider Podcast, and we've been talking to the assistant coaches the last 3 weeks. And so yesterday I interviewed head coach Rob Lanier, and it posted today. And if anybody follows me on Twitter, which is at GA State Voice, you can find it and listen and get some insight as to how our first-year head coach views, a number of our players. Kane's situation is interesting because throughout the offseason, the chatter amongst the fans and on the message boards is that, you've got Kane Williams and Damon Wilson returning from a team that's been to back-to-back NCAA tournaments. But, DeMarcus Simons is gone. Malik Benlevy is gone. Jeff Thomas is gone. Devin Mitchell is gone. The core group is gone. So the question is, who then becomes the center or the core of the basketball team moving forward? Well, obviously you would sit back and say, hey, look at Kane Williams. He's played behind and alongside some of the great players that we've seen at Georgia State in recent years. I think Kane is still in a process of becoming a floor leader. I've seen bits and pieces of it in practice with regards to being a vocal leader and kind of leading the way on the floor and in practice for this team, especially down the stretch. But he's not quite there yet. It's a process because, again, he was playing behind great players or pretty good, really good players the last 2 years. Now it's his turn to step up and assume that role. That's not something that necessarily happens overnight. It's really kind of taken a good bit of the off season after last year and a good bit of the season this year. Even though they've won 18 games, they've been a pretty good ball club. They played well early. They played well even though they lost some big games early in the season at College of Charleston and at Georgetown and at Duke. But they played well enough in those games. They weren't blowouts. So tack on all the experience in all these games that have culminated throughout the season. And now is the time of the year. And most coaches will tell you this. They don't want to peak in December. You want your team kind of peaking in mid to late February on your run into the conference tournament. And Kane and Damon Wilson, for that matter, are really the two guys on the team that are back from last year that had significant playing time, but were in roles where they were role players. They were guys that were coming off the bench. It's different now. Kane and Damon have started every game this year, but their role is now what DeMarcus Simons and Devin Mitchell and Jeff Thomas and Malik were playing last year. And so we'll see. I mean, there's been some nights where they've been great, and there's been other nights where even if they're scoring, again, they go on the road to Texas and they lose, 2 tough ball games. So the process of becoming a leader on the floor and off the floor is something that Kane can and will do and is in the process of doing, but I wouldn't say he's there 100% yet. But certainly you look at his numbers to bring it full circle. He's averaging 14 points, 4 rebounds, almost 4 assists. He's top 10 in steals, pretty good free throw shooter. So he's everything that you would want as he grows into the role, this being his junior season and then heading into his senior season. he's everything that you want, from a player who's had the experiences he's had the last couple of years to be able to say, okay, well, this is the guy or one of the guys that's going to kind of provide the core for us this year going into next season as well.
You're listening to Dave Cohen, voice of the Georgia State Panthers football, baseball, and men's basketball. Dave, good to hear from you. Let's talk a little baseball action. The Panthers sit at 4-3. I was trying to find the score today against the Catamounts. Was there a weather delay or something? I didn't catch the score. Do we have an update for that game?
Well, they did. They backed the game up to 6:30 p.m. Eastern time from Cullowhee. And, with all the rain that we've had, it's kind of thrown some of the college baseball schedules into a quandary. But they're up there. The last score that I saw, and this was probably an hour and a half ago, for all I know, the game may well be over. But Georgia State did score 3 runs early and had a 3-0 lead. But that was, I think, in the second inning. So I follow them on Twitter. But I have not checked for a late inning or a final score as of yet. But certainly off to a good start, with a sweep of all 3 games in the Atlanta Baseball Classic or the Atlanta Baseball Challenge, which Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and Kennesaw State participate in every year. Beat some pretty good teams. I did the game against Cincinnati in the opener, where they came back in the 10th inning and scored 2 runs to win that game 9-8. They then turned around the next day while I was at basketball, and they beat St. John's, and then they closed it out last Sunday with a win over St. Peter's. So for a team that won 14 or 15 games last year, certainly off to a good start under new and first-year head coach Brad Stromdahl, who, again, is no stranger to Georgia State. Brad's a former assistant coach back in the mid-2000s before heading off to Georgia Gwinnett to build that NAIA program into a powerhouse. And so he's back at the ballpark at Panthersville. And, it's going to be what I'll call a roller coaster season for them once they get into conference play. It's a young team. They lost basically their 4 best bats off of last year's squad. There's a number of new faces, but it's a younger team. And, it's going to take him a couple of years to get some more new faces and some experience into that baseball program. And the question is, how competitive can they be in the Sun Belt Conference? I think we've talked about this before. The difference with Georgia State baseball compared to some of the other schools in the Sun Belt Conference, as one of the 2 or 3 major market schools in the league, baseball doesn't have quite the impact collegiately in Atlanta as it does, say, in Lafayette, Louisiana, where if you've ever been there and seen that baseball stadium that they play in, which is probably the equivalent of many AA minor league baseball stadiums, they draw anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 and 4,000 a night to college baseball in Lafayette, Louisiana. That's because there are no other professional baseball or minor league baseball teams anywhere in the vicinity. So they're treated much differently as a college baseball program there than we are here in Atlanta. UT Arlington, kind of the same thing. Again, we were just in Arlington. The University of Texas at Arlington is a hop, skip, and a jump from where the Texas Rangers play. So there, everything is Texas Rangers and Dallas Mavericks and Dallas Stars and obviously the Dallas Cowboys because AT&T Stadium is right there. Like Georgia State baseball is basically a blip on the sports screen in Atlanta. So goes it for UT Arlington. But when you get into some of the really smaller markets, like a Lafayette, Louisiana, or like a San Marcos, Texas, or like a Georgia Southern down in Statesboro, baseball takes on a bigger role. It's treated like more of a major sport than we've ever treated it at Georgia State. So therein lies some of the challenges when it comes to recruiting. You got, our facility is, although it's nice once you get there, and I've been going out there now for going on 25, 30 years, it's not really what we would call an up-to-par college baseball stadium, especially when you're recruiting against the other schools in your league that all take baseball and treat it like a major sport and support it financially like it's a major sport. And they've done it for years. I'm not saying this is something that's happened overnight. This has been going on for years. It's going to be a challenge, to keep up with a lot of the other teams in our league. in what we'll call the baseball facilities arms race. Now, there are plans for Georgia State to build a college baseball stadium on the site of the old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium down by the old Turner Field, which is now Georgia State Stadium, and where we're going to build a basketball arena. But I don't know, is that going to be 3 years away? Is it 5 years away? That's the big question mark. I know that right now the priority is to get that Georgia State Convocation Center - basketball arena built within the next, hopefully, 2 years, and then we'll see what happens with baseball. But again, to come full circle, it's going to be a challenge for the next however many years on the recruiting trail and trying to keep up with what we'll call the haves facility-wise in the Sun Belt Conference, because it's just reality, the way baseball is treated by the various schools and how it's viewed in the markets that each school is located.
Dave, speaking of time, we're out of time. I want to thank you. I want to congratulate you on your 37 years of broadcasting. I know all of it wasn't at Georgia State. We were going to talk about it a little bit. We ran out of time. Our next guest is on the other line. I just want to thank you for all your contributions to this show, and we look forward to talking to you next week. And good luck to the Panthers in the next 2 games, especially the rival Georgia Southern.
Well, I appreciate it. It's always great to be on with you guys, and you're right. If I'm on with you next Wednesday, we'll have a much clearer idea of what path lies ahead for Georgia State. Because again, Friday night, Georgia Southern. March 3, which I believe is next Tuesday, Arkansas Little Rock, both games at the Sports Arena in Atlanta. And when the final buzzer sounds after that Little Rock game, that'll be the final game of the regular season, and the dust will settle, and we'll see where we're at.
All right, Dave. Thank you very much. That's Dave Cohen, the voice of Georgia State football, basketball, and baseball here on ATL Prime Sports. JJ, we talked about Georgia State basketball in depth. Now we're going to go ahead and transition to some hockey, a sport that you and I like an awful lot. You're a St. Louis Blues fan. You're a happy camper. Best record in winning the Stanley Cup last year. Me, I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan. The worst record in the NHL this year. And so was our next guest, Rico Phillips, a friend of the show, who is the winner of the 2019 NHL Willie O'Ree Award. Rico, good to hear from you again. Welcome to ATL Prime Sports with TC and JJ.
Man, it's so good to be here. I know the folks down south are going, we're going to talk about hockey now. This is interesting, right? I love it, man. It's freezing cold up here, snowing.
Down here.
Yeah, and that's why I Todd, you told me that you wanted me to get down there and check it all out. So that's what my plan is, man. Someday.
You need to. You need to come down to Huntsville, Alabama. You need to come down here into Atlanta. Huntsville has a Division I NCAA hockey program. They're struggling this year, but most years they do pretty well. Tell us about what it's been like. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, tell us what it's been like being the 2019 Willie O'Ree Award winner this past year.
It's been an incredible journey for me. And I say incredible. It's hard to describe for what I consider to be an average person, lay person, who my whole world's been flipped upside down. So the reason I say that is because I've been going to places that I would never imagine going, and I've also had the privilege of meeting some fantastic people. And the most important thing I've been able to do is represent our community, the Flint and Genesee County community. And another thing is I've been able to speak to probably 350 or more hockey players about cultural diversity and inclusion and community service. So it's been an awesome opportunity to be an ambassador, and it's like stuff I've never imagined. I retired from the fire department as a result. I had to do something. I had to leave on a high. So this is it.
You're listening to 2019 Willie O'Ree Award winner, NHL Willie O'Ree Award winner, Rico Phillips. Rico, welcome back. It's good to hear from you, man. I got to ask you, from a hockey guy, we got 3 Michigan guys here. What was it like
Great.
seeing that 42-year-old goalie, man, from Carolina, David Ayers, man? What a story.
That is man, what a story. You said that right. I mean, I don't think you can get a better story about the true, I mean, he's like a true sports hero all of a sudden. The average Joe comes out of the stands and goes and suits up and plays in a professional hockey league game. I mean, the NHL, they got a gift actually that night because his nerves calmed down and he actually played one heck of a game, and it's going to turn his world upside down. He's likely going to be an ESPY winner and some NHL highlight award winner of some sort. So it's really cool for him and anybody that's a fan of the sport.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I'm sorry, JJ. What I was going to say to Rico was that, David Ayers went from a practice goalie. He was actually practicing against some of the Toronto Maple Leafs players and also, a Zamboni driver to an emergency goaltender for the Carolina Panthers. He actually beats the team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who he knows well through the minor league system and some of their current players. He let the first 2 shots in on goal, and then he stopped the next 8. And when I looked at the celebration on Twitter in the Carolina locker room with Ron Brindamore, I mean, it's been an absolute fabulous story. It's been a terrific story. I'm sure you've seen it too.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Like I say, any of us hockey purists, we soaked it up, man, and it melted a big smile on my face, that's for sure. It was pretty cool.
You know what? Him. You know what's pretty cool also is, I got to go back to you for a second. You ended this kind of this year-long tour for this award, which you're very deserving of. We're both from Flint, Michigan. We both went to Flint Southwestern High School. You got to have the ceremonial puck drop at the Red Wings game against the Calgary Flames, which used to be here in Atlanta, by the way. And then you also got to talk to the Red Wings in the locker room. Tell us all about that.
Well, the Red Wings have been nothing but a class organization. They contacted me not long after I won the award, and they ended up on their way up to fall training camp. They stopped by, 4 of them stopped by the fire station. I was still working for the Flint Fire Department at the time, and they came in and they brought street hockey sticks and pucks and nets for us to play at the fire station. But then we ended up playing an actual street hockey game in the firehouse, which is, you can't imagine. These guys are really competitive, by the way. It didn't matter that we were just playing floor hockey at the fire station. And you think of the competitive nature of firefighters on top of them guys. It was a great game. But so then moving forward, they said, hey, we want you back on our Hockey is for Everyone celebration, which should be later, in February, which seemed like such a long time away. And then, so they had me come over on Sunday, which was their game this past Sunday. And I had an opportunity to sit on a podcast with Darren McCarty. And if you're a Detroit fan, that was a crazy delight. And then I actually, on the way down, we're going to go do the ceremonial puck drop. And the gentleman that was escorting me, he said, hey, Rico, by the way, there's been a change in plans tonight. And I'm looking at him like, what could be a change in plans? I just got to go and drop the puck, right? And he says, Coach Blashill would like you to come into the locker room and say a few words and then read off tonight's starting lineup. And I looked at him. He said, nobody really gets to do that kind of stuff. Can you handle it? And I was like, yeah, I can handle it. Like, awesome. Oh my God, man, my nerves I told him, I said, man, you're on my last nerves. I'm trying to keep it together, just trying to focus on what I had to do, and then they threw that at me, man. It's total surprise. Now, I want to start by saying that surprise started that night when I was walking down the concourse on my way to one of the interviews I had to do. And some guy stops me and he shakes my hand like we knew each other. And he said, you're the guy on the cover of the program, aren't you? And I said, huh? I am? And he said, yeah. And there was one about 10, 15 feet away laying there. And I said, holy mackerel, I am the guy on the program. So to be on the program cover of a Red Wings game, me, man, get out of here. It was crazy for me, you know, because I've been to how many games and seen the program so many times. It's always a player, and here I was on it. So that was a treat within itself. That was a surprise. So now I'm about to go into the locker room and not be starstruck. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
I come in, I'm staying out in the hallway, and I'm trying to decide, what am I going to say when I go in here, you know? And like I said, I've had the fortune to talk to now hundreds of kids about, you know, what it means for community service and that kind of stuff. So I said, man, just play on that stuff. And I knew that the first words were out of my mouth were going to be, so I hear Coach Blashill talking to the players, and then all of a sudden the door swings open, and he's introducing me as I'm walking in, and I'm standing next to Coach Blashill. All the players are sitting there looking at us, and I'm like in this, like, no way is this happening right now, man. I used to coach youth hockey, so I've given starting lineups and give the rah-rah speech before a game, and here I am before Detroit Red Wings, and they're looking at, I've got them at court. You know, they're just listening to my words, man. And so I'm looking there, and I realize there's a camera set. I'm thinking it's just going to take some steals on me. So I'm just kind of, stay where you're at, Rico. So it kept me in one spot. But I just said, when he introduced me, he says, hey, everyone. I said, I'm just a kid from Flint, and you got to believe this is crazy. And that was, I don't even hardly remember what I said. It was kind of foggy. But I was just so careful not to, like, key in any one particular player, because they were all looking at me, man. And I was just like, this is unbelievable. And then, of course, I get a chance to read out the starting lineup, and there's a little, what would I call it? They clap, two claps between each name being called. And then when I was done, I said, let's go Red Wings. But I didn't say it like that. I gave a lot more enthusiasm, man. And that was my experience. And then I went out and had to go drop the puck. So I was like, oh my gosh, man. And at the conclusion of the game, I actually got a chance to meet Trevor Daly, and we're exchanging contact information. He signed an autograph the stick, and was just so kind to us and gracious, you know, to meet me in person. So incredible night. I mean, it goes on and on. It was just a fantastic opportunity and experience.
Well, Rico, I'm so proud of you and what you've done and what you've accomplished, being a Flint firefighter. I know that's got to be an awful difficult job. My brother-in-law, Tina's husband, is an Ann Arbor firefighter, and I know that, you know, that. Yeah, I know. So you guys
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
yeah, for sure.
Right. So anyhow, I just wanted to let you know that we've got to let you go.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you so much for coming on. And if you give me that information, how in the heck you get a program, send me a note on Messenger, and I would love to have one of those copies. Yeah,
you know, and the guy who took the picture actually said that he set 10 of them aside for me. I left there with only a few, and then I didn't realize people would like them. So I will have one for you, autograph, and send it your way, I promise.
Oh, that's awesome. You don't have to do that. But I would be honored with that. No doubt about it. I would be honored. Yeah.
Well, I don't, and, you know, it sounds really weird for me to say that, because I am just a firefighter, a guy who grew up in Flint. I'm not some famous guy, but I know what it means. You know what I mean? I know what it means.
You are now.
I know what it means. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Rico, you got to come down.
Famous in my book, my friend.
I appreciate that, and I will come down there. If I'm ever down that way, I will definitely look you up. I mean, I want to come to Atlanta. I just don't know when, and if the opportunity presents itself, you better believe I'm on my way.
That's right. You can meet JJ and myself. Thank you for coming on.
Hell yeah.
We're out of time. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with you, and keep in touch.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
No, you too. You take care of yourself. Thanks again.
All right, brother.
That was Rico Phillips, the winner of the 2019 NHL Willie O'Ree Award. He deserves every good thing coming his way. Let's go ahead and hang on, Lou. We're going to go to you. We're going to end the night with you, actually. I'm going to go ahead because JJ is We're going to go ahead and talk UGA, which is right down his alley. Hang on, Lou. We'll go to you in a minute. I'll bring you in as a caller, Lou from New Jersey. But we're going to go to this topic real quick. UGA as a new special teams coach. What kind of an impact will Scott Cochran have with the Bulldogs coming as a special teams coach, as a strength and conditioning coach from Alabama for 13 years under Nick Saban to Georgia as a special teams coach? JJ, tell what kind of impact do you think you'll have?
Huge. For short answer. Long answer is this. UGA has finally pulled him away from Alabama and Nick Saban. Georgia offered him, and Kirby Smart offered him a $500,000 job as the strength and conditioning coach. Back in 2000, when Kirby took over, he declined because simply Nick Saban gave him $100,000 more to pay him $600,000 a year. So he stayed through. He also wanted to stay through to get the retirement benefits for being a state employee for 10 years at Alabama school. But he is going to come in and he is going to replace our special teams coordinator, Scott Fountain, and he will now be the University of Georgia special teams coordinator. Cochran was a strength and conditioning coach, as you mentioned, in Alabama for 13 years, was a big hit with all the players. Look at Josh Jacobs, who tweeted out about the presence of Scott Cochran and what it meant to his career at Alabama and now in the NFL. 2-time strength and conditioning coach of the year. As a special teams coach, he's going to be working with a lot of different position groups in one area, so we can still make an impact on a lot of different players and not have to be put into one room with one quarterback, with 3 quarterbacks, 5 quarterbacks, whatever it is. He'll be practicing with players on a daily basis that might play safety, linebacker, or even maybe you have a couple big guys blocking for the kickoff return guys. So he'll be working with a lot of players, getting to use his abilities. Lane Kiffin over at Ole Miss thinks he's such a good he's got the stuff to be a head coach. He's only 40 years old. He can work his way up the ranks. Heck, Cochran has been part of all 6 of Saban's championships, including one at LSU. So this is a huge get. He will be able to go on the recruiting trail now and be a face of the Georgia coaching staff. Great move for the Dogs and Kirby Smart. Plus the families of Kirby Smart and Scott Cochran are really close together. He's moving to Athens. Huge move. I can't emphasize this much anymore. Georgia's been trying to get this guy for a long time. They got their man.
JJ, how huge of a move is it? Because you had the Twitter war this week between the Alabama fans and the Georgia fans. The Georgia fans needling the Alabama fans. We got your guy. It was critical for Coach Saban to keep him. How big of a deal is this? Because when you look at it on paper, you're thinking, okay, Alabama can get another strength and conditioning coach, and he is just a special teams coach. How big of a deal is this? How big is it? I mean, when I look at it, I don't think it is, but you may think it is.
I think it is a huge deal. I think you see.
Tell me why.
Of the players in the NFL reacting to his hire at Georgia. Former Alabama players, like I mentioned, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry has come out and said he was a big part of his career and why he got so much better. Mark Ingram as well. Lots and lots of running backs especially have come out and say, Bo Scarborough said things. There's a lot of players that interacted with Scott Cochran on a day-to-day basis, whether it was health and nutrition, whether it was getting better. He could, as a strength and conditioning coach, be around the players 24/7. There was no restrictions from the NCAA on strength and conditioning coordinators. So he could do whatever he whenever he wanted with the players with unlimited access. He had more access than any other player. He won't have that as much access, but he wanted to be an on-field coach. Nick Saban strictly said to him, there's no positions for that here. So Kirby says, hey, I think you can help me out. I think you can help me get over the hump. And if it takes getting you an on-field position, so be it. I think the impactful is huge. Only time will tell if it plays out.
Well, I tell you what, JJ, it sounds like each coaching staff really handled this situation very professionally. Saban said that he was looking for, a new career path, like you said. He said he'd like to be a head coach one day down the line. And Saban's told him, hey, Cochran, look, we don't have anything for you at this time. Kirby Smart did, who Smart coached under his defensive coordinator, as you know, under Saban for years at Alabama. So, this all seems like, a very good thing for Cochran and for Alabama and, and Georgia. And it was handled cordially. And to me, JJ, when you look at the stupid Twitter war, and I will emphasize the word stupid, ignorant, just low down trash, going back and forth on Twitter, these fans have no clue what they're talking about. They act like they stole a coach from them. They didn't steal a coach from them. UJ had a job opening. Bama didn't. This guy wanted to increase his career. And each program said, great, let's just do it. I thought it was tremendous on each side.
Absolutely.
I really did. And I know you did too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Saban and Smart have known each other for years. Their job is to, as head coaches, not only for these kids to make them into men and help them be successful later on in life and have a good football experience and an education experience at the respective schools, but also to help the coaches out to move up in their profession if they choose to do so. And each of these coaches really need to be commended in this circumstance. They really do.
I agree with you 100%. Each coach respects the other coach. And honestly, it was a mutual agreement.
And you know what? You may be right. This is a big deal. I don't know if it's a program turner. I think it's all done by recruiting. Now, Saban, like you said, he's had his conditioning coach for 13 years. He will be hard to replace, but knowing Nick Saban, he'll replace him. And let's go ahead and go to the lines. We will take callers at 678-280-7123. Got about 5 minutes or so for the show to remain. We've got Lou on the line from New Jersey. Lou, welcome to ATL Prime Sports with TC and JJ. How you doing today?
Thanks, Sean. All right.
Lou, what's on your mind this evening? You're welcome to talk about anything.
Well, as you know, spring training has begun, and the Yankees are starting out just like they did last year with already players on the injured list. And one of them is one of our star pitchers.
I'm glad you said that, Lou. I was thinking about that when I saw that Severino to have Tommy John surgery. That is a bummer.
Yeah.
And James Paxton, guys, he's already out. He's the number 3 starter. Now you got Severino as the 2 starter. This is going.
Well,
the Yankees do have an advantage. They do have the financial wherewithal and potentially the guys in the minor league systems to avoid disaster here, missing 2 and 3. So, the Yankees are going to take it one day at a time, and if they can make a trade, they will, either before the deadline or during the deadline. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it. The young kids coming up, we'll see, Jordan Montgomery's going to be a big piece. He's missed time due to injury. So, but listening to Brett Boone today, he just time to move on. All the injuries they had last year due to the lineup, Lou and JJ, they recovered through that. Can they recover through this and win the division and beat Tampa Bay? Because Tampa Bay's rotation is better this year than it was last year.
That's a team that worries me. There isn't really much competition in the American League this year. Houston, forget it. Boston doesn't have their top player anymore. He's going out west. So the only team that really worries me is Tampa Bay because they've really stepped up in recent years. Now, if they can get a crowd to go with it. But Tampa Bay looks to be a very dangerous team.
It's going to be a very dangerous team, and Boston's projected to finish 3rd. Toronto's expected to get better, and Baltimore is going to severely struggle. When you look at the American League in a whole, you've got the Twins in the Central, you've got the Indians in the Central, and you've got the much improved White Sox. You have the Astros who are going through the sign stealing scandal.
Cheaters.
Hang on, Lou. Going through the sign stealing scandal, and they lost Cole to the Yankees. And then you have the Angels who have improved. We don't know how much. And of course, the A's, who everybody writes off, and they seem to get in the playoffs every year. So to me, the American League is really wide open now due to the injuries of Severino, who's out for the year with Tommy John surgery, and Paxton, who's eventually going to come back. I think the playing field in the American League has been really leveled. What do you think, Lou?
Well,
I love the cheaters comment. That was hilarious.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Boston doesn't look too much of a threat anymore. Now again, we're their top player. Chicago, I'm not really sold on the White Sox just yet.
Oh, you know what? They could steal a wild card spot. I mean, when you look at the White Sox, they've improved their roster greatly. But I think these two injuries to these pitchers have leveled the playing field, not only in the AL East, because Tampa Bay could win it, but the American League in general, JJ, it is wide open, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I don't remember a year in recent years where I felt like it was wide open like this, simply because we felt the Astros were so overly so much better than everybody else. Now you mentioned level the playing field. It's very, very close, very competitive. If you're putting a shot out of the cannon, I'm going to say Tampa Bay wins this division. I'm sorry to say that, Lou, but I think Tampa Bay's got the goods. I think they got the lineup. And
I'm afraid you're right.
It's kind of a homer pick, though. Austin Meadows is a good friend of mine, so it's kind of a homer pick.
Well, I don't blame you. And it really not only is you quote unquote a homer pick. It's a pick that could be reality. I'll still pick the Yankees based on their financial wherewithal, and they always seem to find somebody to put on the pinstripes to get it done. They're going to have to rely on Sessa, a young pitcher. They're going to have to rely on guys that they have not relied on consistently. So, Lou, we got any more questions before we wrap up the show?
No, I know you're short on time, so I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, Lou, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for
My
holding
pleasure.
so long. Any other callers? 678-280-7123. We got about a minute. We'll be glad to take your call regarding anything this evening. I want to thank our three guests, Gabriella Cruz of Fox Sports Cleveland for coming on, Dave Cohen, the voice of Georgia State football, basketball, and baseball, and Rico Phillips, my Flint, Michigan hero. We both went to Flint Southwestern High School. He won the 2019 Willie O'Ree Award. We've had him on the show before. He talked about his experience with the Red Wings. To me, it hits home, and I'm really glad that he came on. JJ, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank all our listeners, and thank you, Breck, for doing a great job behind the board. And you guys all have a great evening, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday, same time here on ATL Prime Sports between 8 and 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good night, everybody.
We'll see you same time, same place, prime time with the stablesnetwork.com. Get you one.